Welcome back to the studio. I am joined by Charles Cohen, the CEO of the Department of Trust. Hello, Charles.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
I'm very well. Welcome into the studio.
Thank you very much.
Do you like our studio here?
I love it. It's great. It's a sort of bijou outdoor feel to it in the middle of the Excel. Very nice.
And you were saying to me just now before the interview that you've been coming to ICE for 20 years.
Yeah.
Last time, obviously, being 2019. Did you appreciate the time off or did you miss ICE?
Oh, I appreciated the time off because it was the first time in 20 years that I haven't spent all my time on an airplane. But it's a shame. It was a shame because people like to get together. It's a very, very sociable industry. And actually, yesterday, the nicest thing about it was just seeing people meet each other, and they haven't obviously met in person for a couple of years, and there was a lot of good vibes and friendship. It was really nice, actually, kind of heartwarming.
Oh, what a great way to begin. So with gamblers either looking to reduce their play or cut it entirely amid the cost of living crisis, do you feel that the industry is facing a hit in revenue even before any new measures come into force?
You know, this morning, the Office for National Statistics announced that the rate of inflation is now 7%.
Yeah.
Fuel, I think, is 9 or 10%. Now, bear in mind that the government target is 2%. And it hasn't been this high for 30 years. And 30 years ago, the online gambling industry did not exist. Right? So we have never experienced a period like this before. And of course, it's not just the UK, it's everywhere. And I actually am worried that this is more than just a problem. This is, for some operators, an existential risk. Because people who are gambling, they're using their disposable income, or they should be using their disposable income, and that's fine. But what happens when you, as an individual, can no longer calculate mentally what your disposable income is because you literally don't know what things cost anymore? So this very fast-moving cost of living crisis is going to translate very, very quickly into a huge affordability crisis for the industry. And it's worrying. It's very worrying.
That's such an interesting point. Of course, people can't grasp their disposable income when it's changing so rapidly, and it seems like it's changing all the time. So how does one sort of manage their spend?
Yeah. I mean, this is the basic evil of inflation. And because most people have not experienced it before, they don't understand. It's not just about prices rising, it's the fact of the unpredictability of it. So most people maintain sort of a mental accounting. You know, some sort of broad numbers. They know how much they earn, they know roughly what their rent, their mortgage is, and then they have little pockets of money that they know they're going to spend on essentials, food, fuel, mortgage, rent, that kind of stuff, right? And then they know roughly how much they've got at the end of each month. And you know, this is why the first thing you see on a bank statement is a balance on your app. Is the balance. It tells you how much you've got left, and people do check them. And people with mobile banking, on average, check their balance once every couple of days. So they try to stay aware, and that's good, sensible, healthy financial behavior. Your problem is that you don't know until the bill comes in how much you've actually spent on some of these basic things. You may get a letter tomorrow saying your mortgage has gone up. You know, a lot of people coming off fixed rates. We've had historically low levels of interest. That's almost certainly going to change. And it's the unpredictability of it. And when you don't know how much the weekly shop is going to be, you can't plan anymore. And so adjusting is very difficult, very, very difficult. And you know, the reality about gambling spend is most people will spend, you know, £50, £100 a month on it. It's a leisure activity. They're perfectly in control. But that's not the point. You know, the point is that £100 has to be free money. And I say free money as in available for spending. You know, spending it is not going to compromise your ability to put food on the table. That's sensible. But how do you deal with it in a situation where you don't know? And so the natural, rational response is to cut back. You say, I'm going to play it safe. I'm just going to spend a little bit less, going to deposit a little bit less, or maybe spread out the days a bit less, maybe stop playing with that site, stay with that site. And that's fine, because I still enjoy it, I still want to do it, and that's absolutely fine. But I don't know what I can afford anymore. That's a big problem.
And does the affordability conversation potentially play into the reform of campaigners' hands?
Well, it could do. And in fact, it probably will do unless the industry responds sensibly to it. And I mean not sort of grand schemes that are going to take years, like single customer views, where they need to get everybody to participate or nobody gets any value out of it. I think the industry needs to accept the fact that it sells a very unusual product in that it's not like a shopping site where you buy an item. What you spend on it is related to what you want to spend on it. There's no sort of physical limit. And so therefore there is a big risk that people will spend more than they can afford without realizing it. And the government realizes this, people realize this, the industry has to get to the point where it normalizes the process of affordability checking against facts, not against some sort of speculative statistic about what the income in your postcode might have been 5 years ago, because none of that is meaningful anymore, not in a world of 7% inflation. And the industry has to wake up to the fact that that we need to change the way that it's done. We need to change the conversation with the player, and we need to bring affordability into the process of managing the customer life cycle in just the same way that we did very effectively with things like ID verification, age verification, geolocation, anti-fraud on card payments. The industry has adapted to these things in the past. The sky didn't fall in. It helped create a more stable and sustainable industry. And the same thing got to happen with affordability. But they've got to want to do it.
There's been a lot of talk about technology and how it can provide a nuanced approach. What is the Department of Trust doing to facilitate that?
So we take the view that there is only one source of data which can really tell you whether somebody can afford their gambling spend, or any of their spend, frankly, and that is the data that comes from their bank accounts. Now, a few years ago, it was effectively impossible to capture people's bank account data efficiently, process it, understand it, and act upon it. Now, with this thing that's called open banking, which is a regulatory change in the financial world that the government has insisted on, and is actually all over Europe, Australia, Canada. Nearly every single bank now offers open banking, and what open banking allows you to do is give your consent to your bank to share your bank data with a third party. And the third party has to be licensed by the FCA, but once they've got that, they can do the analysis. And the idea is to open up the banking business to fintechs. So people are probably familiar with budgeting apps, and if you turn on your mobile banking, sometimes you'll see a little categorized list that tells you how much you spent on coffee and all this kind of stuff. That's all being driven by open banking. So most people are using it without actually realizing. But anyway, what open banking means is that the infrastructure is in place for players to actually share data with trusted third parties that can be used to do this analysis in real time, objectively, without any mistakes being made. And that's an incredible asset for the industry if it can use it.
Yeah, so obviously concerns have been raised across the industry about the impact of affordability checks on players. And obviously we've discussed that around the inflation risks at the moment. Do you think there could be a push to educate stakeholders and what does that look like? You've obviously made some suggestions of what should happen, but how do we do that?
Well, so the first stage, I think, is for people to learn and know about this capability. I mean, we're the first business to come out with a product designed specifically for the gambling sector to use it, but there's lots of other companies out there that have got open banking, various different formats. And I think that education piece is the first one. And there's two parts to it. One part is that operators need to not be scared of affordability. They need to understand that at some point you're going to have to do it. So you might as well do it in a way that doesn't put off your customer. 90% of players refuse to share financial data with gambling companies because they don't trust them and because it's a hassle. And an operator phones up a customer who they might have had for years and say, hey, we really love you. We love you so much we're going to suspend your account and you're going to give us your bank statements. And if you don't give us your bank statements, we're going to have to close your account. What kind of a message does that send to a company? Can you imagine going into Starbucks and going to buy a coffee and they say, can you afford that coffee? Send me your bank statements. I need to see your bank, show me your banking app. I mean, you just would not tolerate it. And if the gambling industry wants to continue to be seen as a responsibly managed, normal entertainment service, then we have to get over this problem of customers being scared away by these requests. And that means what I come back to is saying we've got to normalize it. So that's one part of it. The second part of it is that I think the conversation needs to go from being about harm to preventing harm to maintaining health. So preventing harm is obviously the end goal for the regulator. Okay, but I think actually the positive view of it is that we can play a part in ensuring continual financial health for players, so they don't get themselves into trouble, and they are aware of what they can spend, and they can make their own decisions. I mean, the Gambling Commission, when it put out its consultation on customer interaction, said very clearly, our goal is to try to balance freedom and responsibility. That's a very, very interesting dilemma, right? Because if you go to the extreme that some of the campaigners want of saying everybody has to have their affordability checked if they spend more than £100, well, there's no freedom in that. You have taken away the right of people to decide what to do with their own money. That's unsustainable. No one's going to accept that. And it also implies that gambling is inherently dangerous for everybody because there's this line, and that's just wrong. And I can't see that flying. But at the same time, having no limit is equally irresponsible because then you're saying there's no need to check. Everybody can be completely trusted. As long as the money is in their bank account, they could spend it. Well, we know that that's not right as well. So that's the trade-off. And I do think the industry wants to get better at this. And with the support of the regulators and with technology, I think we can move the conversation into a better place.
It is a real dilemma, as you say, because it is granting people the agency to make their own decisions of how they interact with these entertainments, but also taking responsibility as an industry. And obviously, the way that games are designed in their nature are addictive. Do you think there's any changes that could be made there?
Okay, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to challenge you on that.
Okay,
so
go on.
Games are not designed to be addictive.
Okay.
This is, I've been in the game design side of the industry and a platform design, and games are designed to be entertaining. They're definitely not designed to be addictive because that actually is not in the interests of either the operator or the game designer. They are designed to offer an attractive pastime that someone can play for a period of time and remain in control. Services can be addictive, but actually the element of the service that's addictive is quite subtle because it's to do with the impact of the anticipation of the wager and all this kind of stuff. And it's a very, very difficult balance to strike. But the reality is most people, most of the time, do not get addicted to the games. And I've been on the inside of these things, and I can tell you for sure that they do not design them to be addictive. Because, that would just be self-destructive. However, the industry has actually been very good over the last decade in which the online space has really taken off in embracing insights from the scientists that study problem gambling and implementing things like time checks, take a break, limits, velocity limits, speed limits, all this kind of stuff. Things that are associated with problem gambling to try to limit the risk of doing it. And they've been able to do that without making the games boring and to keep the entertainment. I think that's a good thing, and that's just going to continue to evolve. And bear in mind, this is a very new business. We're really only in the early days of this industry.
Yeah.
And it's going to take decades, and as people's behavior changes and as the media change and their expectations change, you'll see. Look, there's a lot of discussion about the addictive qualities of all kinds of games, even ones that don't involve gambling. So this is a big topic, and it's definitely not just on this industry.
Absolutely, and it doesn't need to necessarily be people or profit. It could be people and profit, and it sounds like that you're prioritizing the people who use these entertainments at the center of your work.
Yeah, we're really just on a mission to create a flow of information. So we just fundamentally believe that an aware customer is an empowered customer, and you can't have agency without awareness. But at the same time, the operator has a right and a need to certain information, but not more information than they need to make a judgment. And that's what we're trying to solve. And it was a problem. It's always been a problem, but now it needs to be a priority. And operators are coming to us and asking for help, and it's great to be able to do that at this point. The backdrop of the economic situation just makes it more urgent.
And what's at stake here? Do you feel the warnings of players flocking en masse to offshore sites are valid? Are these warnings justified?
No, I don't buy that for a minute. Sorry, I'm going to get into trouble with the BGC for this. That problem of the offshore industry has always been there. It's never gone away. But I don't think it's the big problem that everyone says it is. Because the power of the brands, the fact that you can use your debit card, you're not taking a risk, you don't have to go and get yourself a crypto wallet to do it, you're going to get your money. All of the things that were the reasons why we favored a regulated onshore industry in the first place are still valid, right? Consumers are not stupid. Now, if someone's got a gambling problem and they've been banned from every operator in the UK, maybe that person will go to the extra effort of seeking out something offshore. That's a totally different problem. Now, I think the real risk here, I hate to say it, is that the industry misreads what's going on, and actually not individual operators, but actually their representatives and also the media, and actually paints the industry as being a fundamentally irresponsible business which puts profit over people. And we end up with a much, much more draconian regime. And actually we do end up with something like a hard limit, £100 or £200 limit. People are allowed to spend that much, after which you have to have an affordability check. And listen, that would be great for my business. Oh, it would be amazing. But it would also fundamentally change the industry, and not necessarily in a good way. We've already seen people exiting the market because it's just become too difficult. It's very, very hard to make a profit. This would make it worse, borderline impossible for a lot of people, and that can't be a good thing.
Charles, I feel like we could sit here all day and discuss this.
I
There's
haven't
obviously
finished my
so
water
much
yet.
to discuss on this topic, but we have to move on with the show. Thank you so much for your time, Charles. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you very much.